Hello and welcome to Endemic Times. My name is Amira. The American legal system, the American healthcare system, the two most uncomplicated, affordable, easy to understand and access systems that our country. Wait. Just kidding. No, our legal system and healthcare system are none of those things. They are both confusing, they are both extremely expensive, and access to adequate service in both of these areas is pretty much out of reach for most everyday citizens without having to really dip into pocketbooks. Well, today we're talking about when these two systems come together, the American legal system in relation to the prison system and the American healthcare system. What kind of experience have you had with the American legal system? Leave a comment down below. What kind of experience have you had with the American healthcare system? Leave another comment down below. Have you or someone you know ever dealt with the American prison system? What about trying to access healthcare while in prison? Would it surprise you to learn that a good portion of people that are incarcerated get their first access to consistent healthcare in prison? And a large portion of the prison population have chronic illnesses, many unknown until incarceration, which means they need to have healthcare access while in prison. Well, what if I told you that access to healthcare in prisons could no longer exist? How is this possible in 2023? How is this possible in the richest nation? Well, when you're living in a country with the highest amount of incarcerated people, but a pretty broken system, all things are possible. Before we get into it, hit that like button. And while you're there, subscribe and also hit that little bell icon. You don't want to miss out on this channel. Now let's get into it. American prisoners are at risk of losing their access to healthcare. It's not to say that their access to healthcare is great now. Quite the contrary. The failing American healthcare system that citizens deal with is just a mirror of what prisoners experience. From a lack of access to care, long wait times for treatment, all-out denials of treatment, and ultimate death because of a failure to provide care are taking place in the world's wealthiest nation, a nation that has the highest incarceration rate, that at the end of 2020 had over 1.7 million people in a state or federal prison or local jail. American prisoners currently have access to healthcare because of the case of Estelle v. Gamble, which simply put said that not providing healthcare to incarcerated people because of deliberate indifference was cruel and unusual punishment, thus violating the Eighth Amendment. Cruel and unusual punishment doesn't have a specific definition, which means the courts can interpret it differently based on who is in the chair. If the Eighth Amendment comes to the Supreme Court, the concern is what legal standard are the justices going to use? We have a very conservative majority in the Supreme Court, with many that use the originalist interpretation of laws, which basically means they look at the context of a law or court decision from when it was created. The Eighth Amendment was adopted in 1791, so it makes it very concerning that our current Supreme Court justices in 2023 are going to possibly look at the originalist view of the Eighth Amendment from 1791, leaving out societal progress and consensus, which is exactly what they did in the Dobbs case, overturning Roe v. Wade. And there is a good reason to be concerned here. The majority decision in Dobbs was written by Justice Alito that used a particular originalist interpretation of the 14th Amendment's guarantee of liberty. Alito and the majority justices used language and interpretations from the 13th and 15th century. Yeah, if you want to learn more, check out this video. The societal consensus on Roe at the time it was overturned was that the majority of the general public wanted the rights from Roe to stay. But this originalist interpretation by the court is now warranting concern in regards to prisoners' health care and a possibility of the majority conservative justices overturning the Estelle case that said it was cruel and unusual punishment to not provide health care. Justice Alito has hinted at this in a dissenting opinion that discussed the Eighth Amendment, with Alito saying that the standards of moral decency are problematic because it's basically using a philosophical basis rather than a legal one. Philosophy and law don't really play nice with each other. Paying attention to these developments in the court is important to do because since the pandemic, COVID-related lawsuits are working their way through the courts, which could open the door for the Supreme Court to decide that withholding treatment or failing to protect prisoners from pandemics does not embody cruel and unusual punishment as understood in the Constitution. This is why legal scholars are concerned. With the justices holding these originalist views, it doesn't allow for societal norms and conditions that have taken place since 1791. A lot has changed since then. Our world looks and operates very differently. That's why having these conservative justices has been a concern since their appointments, because they are changing interpretations of law that are not taking into account the changes our society has had over time. It's not 1791, it's 2023, but good luck getting the justices to see that. I mentioned at the top that the American healthcare system is failing, and the same can and should be said for healthcare for prisoners. Prisoners are dealing with a multitude of issues, as we see here, with just one woman and her experience in the prison healthcare system.
Jada Raspberry was 18 when she was arrested for armed robbery. She spent the next 6 years in Valley State Prison, about a 4-hour drive from downtown Los Angeles. In 2011, a year before she was released, Jada experienced a medical condition that nearly cost her her life.
I started experiencing really bad abdominal pain in my lower stomach and in my back and in my side. The nurse told me that the pain I was experiencing was that my body wanted to be pregnant. He didn't say that I had a UTI. He didn't say that I had, white blood cells in my urine. He didn't say that I had anything wrong. I wasn't given anything to take my pain away. At the time, I had no idea the severity of my, illness.
Jada says she visited the prison's clinic more than 10 times, paying numerous $5 copays to see its medical staff. Yes, inmates pay for their health care too, but she says she was always told to just drink more water, until one day, she became unresponsive.
My heart rate shot up sky high. My blood pressure was high. Nothing was coming down. The UTI was not taken care of in a timely manner, so it traveled to my kidney. It took 2.5 months for me to actually get back to the infirmary and get the medication that was required for me to no longer be in pain and for the kidney infection to go away.
Jada's story is not uncommon. She's part of a number of inmates who suffer from medical neglect while incarcerated in U.S. prisons and jails.
We get letters and phone calls every single day, and the majority of our complaints are about medical or mental health care. A UTI is very preventable when seen by a physician and given care and given medication and treatment, and the discomfort can be shortened. And this was care that they were not getting. So the jail facilities were in fact just kind of exacerbating symptoms that could have been resolved or that could have been prevented. The complaints that we get, I filed 5, 6 grievance forms about, this issue. And, no one's come in and talked to me about my complaint. It's very much, what's the point of an inmate grievance system if it's not being utilized? So what's the purpose of this policy if they can't even get a grievance form? And then once they do, if they're not getting a reply or request, then they're not able to follow through with whatever is set in policy.
And all of this is probably why there's not a lot of data on this kind of medical neglect.
Jails and prisons are very isolated. They're not very transparent. We talk about smart justice, and the way that we can do that is if we have information, if we have data.
So it's been 5 years this year that I've been home, and I still experience pain from my kidneys from the situation. So there is no way to treat anybody inside of a facility such as prison or jail. All it does is just exacerbates the issues, and it makes people worse.
And she is not alone. This happens in both male and female prisons.
I actually watched a good friend of mine that was not a life-term inmate who had a definite date to get out, turn green and die in his bunk.
Prison healthcare in the U.S. is broken. After serving their time, prisoners will almost certainly be sicker upon their release, if they even make it that long. Joseph Calderon was in prison for 17 years.
While serving time in the security housing unit, I had chest pain one night, 7 sharp pains that woke me up out of a dead sleep.
Joe wasn't able to see a doctor the night of his chest pain. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that he finally got to see one. Joe says the doctor told him he just had a muscle cramp and sent him back to his cell with Benadryl. While prisoners are the only Americans who are constitutionally guaranteed to have healthcare, they often have to fight to see doctors and get medicine. Okay, so why is prisoner healthcare so bad? When it comes to political power, prisoners rank pretty much at the bottom. In certain states, they can't even vote. And prisoners rank at the bottom of the social ladder too. American society generally views people in prisons and jails as deserving of whatever mistreatment they get. There just isn't the political will to make prisons and jails more humane. And state and city governments are under tremendous pressure to make the cost of incarceration as low as possible. Low pay at facilities tends to attract less qualified doctors. Much of the medical care is outsourced to private contractors, who often rely heavily on unlicensed medical assistants instead of doctors. And it can take months to even see a doctor. One of those contractors, Southern Health Partners, only requires its doctors to spend 6 hours a week visiting jails. And one doctor may be responsible for thousands of inmates.
We see cases every day of the most horrific abuse and neglect of desperately sick people. A prisoner told to take Tums for what turned out to be cancer. Nurses failing to deliver medications and falsifying records to show that they did. We had one case where a nurse wrote in the patient's chart that he had his vital signs were normal and he was in no apparent distress, despite the fact that the prisoner had actually died 10 hours earlier.
If they're lucky enough to get actual medical advice, prisoners might not be able to afford following it. They're still charged for copays and prescriptions. Their jobs in prison pay just pennies an hour.
The average pay scale is about 18 cents an hour, so $5 for your medications can start to add up.
Prisons and jails are designed to break people down. It's all but impossible to get meaningful care in a prison setting that is inherently detrimental to a person's physical and mental health. And stressful conditions, lack of exercise, and a diet full of salt, sugar, and carbohydrates don't do much to help sick inmates heal.
It's not unusual to see people who look 15, 20 years older than their chronological age.
So what do you think? It seems the real question isn't should prisoners get adequate health care, but how badly are we as a society willing to treat people in American prisons and jails?
What do you think? Do you think that prisoners should have access to healthcare? Do you see it as cruel and unusual punishment to not provide it? For me personally, I think the way that prisoners currently receive healthcare is atrocious and should constitute cruel and unusual punishment because so much of it is dependent on the prison system complex, which is a whole other video. If you're interested in me covering that, let me know down in the comments below. This to me is just a symptom of the bigger issue with the American healthcare system. It's expensive, it's highly discriminatory to many disenfranchised groups. What do you think about this? Have you had any experiences, good or bad, in the American healthcare system? It would be interesting to see the differences that people may or may not have. I would hope that regardless of one's view on Roe and all of the amped up discourse that topic brings, that we can find our middle on this, that American citizens imprisoned should at the least have access to healthcare. Why this would even be a question is beyond me. And it once again makes me so frustrated with Democrats because it didn't have to be this way. They had 50 years to codify these rights that would have protected more than a woman's right to reproductive health. It would protect a right to privacy, marriage equality, securing healthcare, and a host of other things that we will likely see get challenged in this conservative Supreme Court. These are appointments for life, and right now, our Supreme Court has a lot of young, healthy people at the helm. They will be around for quite some time. We no longer have to seek to live in interesting times. We are living them, and it sure is interesting. And a little scary. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If for some reason you didn't, feel free to give it a thumbs down and leave a comment down below and let me know all of your thoughts. If you're looking for any resources, maybe you know someone that's in prison or jail, or maybe yourself is going to prison or jail or something like that, I have 2 links to some articles to give you some ideas of what your rights currently are in the prison system in relation to healthcare, and I have those linked in the description box below. I also have all of the links to the articles and videos that I researched to make this video in the description box. Again, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of your support, and as always, stay safe, take care, and be kind to each other.